Okay, we're now live.
Councillors, we just appear to have lost the Mayor for a moment. Perhaps the Deputy Mayor could take over while he rejoins. You're still on mute there, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you for that. So just 1 second. I'll get the agenda. I'd just like to, hang on. Just trying to get prepared here at this second's notice. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to elders from other communities who may be here today. The opening prayer, if I just ask everybody to stand, please. Almighty God, we humbly ask thee to bless and guide this council in these deliberations so that we may truly preserve the welfare of people whom we serve. Amen. Present. We should be all present. The Mayor is not present at the moment, and we hope the Mayor will rejoin us shortly. There's nobody absent. Acceptance of apologies and grounding leave, we have none. We have no citizenship ceremonies. Confirmation of the minutes. If I could ask somebody to move that, please. Councillor Grant to move it and Councillor Fuller to second it. All those in favour? Nobody against. Conflict of interest? Any conflict of interest? Don't hear about any conflict of interest. There's no reception of petitions, no hearing of deputations. Make sure I'm in the right place here. Is there any council reports? No council reports. Reports, executive services? No.
Nothing, Deputy Mayor.
Item 13.1, community wellbeing. Jamie Chubb.
Thank you. So this report is presented to Council this afternoon in relation to the Australia Day event and the policy that we have that supports the awards process for Australia Day. On review of the policy and to make sure that it is inclusive and representative of our community, there are a number of recommendations for additions to the policy and to some of the changes to how the Australia Day events across our municipality and the associated awards process will be run. So the recommendation before Council this afternoon is that there's 4 changes made to the policy that relates to the event and the awards, and those changes are that we include an Indigenous representative on the Australia Day Award selection panel, that council officers and councillors are excluded from being able to nominate people for the Australia Day Award, that the MC and the civic address speakers for the Australia Day events are the Mayor and all councillors, and that North Wangaratta is to be sanctioned and financially supported as a rural Australia Day event.
Thank you, Jamie. Would somebody like to move that, please? Mover is Councillor Jack Herry and seconder is Councillor Irene Grant. Would somebody like to speak on that motion? Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge the North Wang community and the way they work together. They're a great little tight-knit group, and it's important to acknowledge them. So I'm grateful to see this included in there.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm happy to second the motion for the Australia Day awards policy. I think Australia Day activities in the rural city of Wangaratta have been very important and enjoyed by a cross-section of a broad cross-section of the community. And if we can work together to actually improve, the celebrations that we have on that day and the representation at the celebration, I think that's got to be a good thing and a positive thing. And I think if we can work towards making these events inclusive and relevant and meaningful for everybody in the rural city of Wangaratta, I think that's very positive. So I would certainly support the work that's been done in the policy area.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Now that the Mayor is back, I'll hand back to you, Mr Mayor, and if there's anybody else wants to speak to the motion.
Okay, so this is 13.1. Thank you, Councillor Bussell. Sorry, Councillor Bustles, who was the mover?
Just who was the mover again?
Mr.
Councillor
Mayor,
Herry.
it was
Councillor.
Sorry.
Yep.
And the seconder?
Councillor Grant was the seconder.
And thank you. Thank you, Councillor Grant. Did any other councillor like to talk to the recommendation?
If I'll say some words if no one else would like to speak.
Right, sorry, Jack. I thought you might have spoken first as the mover, so sorry about that. I'll just make sure no one else does. So when Councillor Herry finishes off, that'll be the last time someone will talk. So thank you, Councillor Herry.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Yeah, absolutely support the comments made by my fellow councillors. And I just want to say that I think alongside some of the more general changes which provide clarity in who can nominate in the awards and the particulars which solidify the role of the Mayor and councillors in the awards ceremony, I think this amendment to the policy includes a particularly important revision, which is to ensure there is an Indigenous representation on the Australia Day Awards selection panel. There was definitely clear support for strong action toward reconciliation coming out as a clear indicator from the community in our engagement for the council plan. As such, I don't doubt this will be but one of many positive steps toward reconciliation with our First Nations community members to be made over the course of the next 4 years. I look forward to seeing momentum build in this space. Thank you, Mayor Rees.
Thank you, Councillor Herry. I'll now put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Thank you, Councillor Bustle, having a few audio issues, so thanks for taking over at the spur of the moment situation. I just might move back a few steps and I'm going to go back to the presentation of councillors' report. So Beck, if you could take the main part off screen there and put councillors back. I'd just like to talk about one of our directors, Director Jamie Chubb. It's her final council meeting. She is leaving us here at council after just over 7 years, nearly 7.5 years of being involved in a director role here at council. It's been a great pleasure having you on, Jamie. I know you've developed a lot of things with council more recently, the great work you've put into our community vision and council plan moving forward, and I know that council certainly is in a better place with the work that you've done, and I know that we'll see a lot more of you as well coming with your new position. I'd like to hand over to you for a few words, and one of the ones I want to know, Jamie, your best time at council specifically, what was the most important issue that was raised that you did in your directorate that had a great outcome for council?
Thank you, Mayor Rees. That's a really difficult question. Do you know, I think that the time, and this is reflective of the organisation and the strength of the councils, I think that the pulling together of a regional relief centre over the summer period last year was a huge achievement for council, and I think really showed everybody what incredible humans we have in our region, and specifically at council and many of our organisations and services that we work with. It was a very intense 12 odd days, and I will always be incredibly proud of what we did in pulling that together so quickly to support our region. There's a whole heap of projects. I think the city is an amazing place. I'm proud to continue to be a resident here and raise my family, and the Rural City of Wangaratta is an amazing organisation, and the community should be very proud of the work that's being done. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a great time having you on here. And again, as I reiterate, I look forward to seeing you in your new role, which will be a very valued part through our rural city as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you. You're a great, wonderful, inspiring group of people to work with. So
thank you. Okay, well, we'll move on. Thank you for that one. We'll go to corporate services, and this is item 14.1. It's our draft financial plan. Thank you, Director Brindley.
Thank you. So this item regarding the draft 2021 to 31 financial plan. The Local Government Act 2020 requires all councils to develop and adopt a financial plan. It's a 10-year plan that finances the projects, services and facilities that the community thinks are the most important to the rural city of Wangaratta, including those projects recently adopted in the Community Vision and Council Plan. It also ensures that ongoing funding is in place for the essential services that council provides on a daily basis. The plan sets out council's projections regarding future revenues and expenses, rates, borrowings, key capital works projects, and also the assumptions that we're making that really will have the biggest impact on council's finances over the next 10 years. The Local Government Act requires that the financial plan is developed with community engagement, and that's been done starting with the Community Vision and the Council Plan, and most recently the Shape Our Financial Future online survey, which we had open and received 89 responses, and the key messages from that survey are included further down in the report. The next step of the community engagement is to publish the draft 2021 to 31 financial plan for public exhibition to allow the community to view the document in full, and the public is encouraged to make submissions and have their say on this draft document through that process. I won't read through all the lines on the page, but in summary, the request to council is now that it endorses the draft 2021 to 31 financial plan for public exhibition up until 5 p.m. on Friday, the 24th of September. And then that if a hearing is required, we hold a hearing before returning to the October council meeting to hopefully adopt the final version. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Brindley. Thank you, councillors. Can I have someone move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Fuller. And the seconder, Councillor Grant. Would anybody like to, sorry, Councillor Fuller, would you like to talk on the recommendation, or just happy to move?
I'd just like to point out that now is an opportune time while we're all sort of at home to sit through this document and contribute something with that submission date of September 24.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Grant?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I certainly reiterate Councillor Fuller's comments, and it's an opportunity for people to make some meaningful input into what is a very important document. It's a living document and one that we, constantly review and ensure that it remains relevant to what the rural city of Wangaratta is doing. It's been interesting, the survey results, the sorts of comments that people have made, some of it's, or most of it actually isn't news to council in terms of, what people are asking us to do. They're asking us to do more with less. People don't want to see rates go up. But anyway, it now is an opportunity for people to make a submission and meaningfully respond to the financial plan and certainly help guide council in its deliberations as we move forward with the financial plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Would any other councillor like to talk on the work done? Councillor Herry, please.
Thanks, Mayor Rees. Yeah, I just want to say a few words with respect to the engagement completed to inform the development of the financial plan we've got on the table at the moment. I just want to say it's really encouraging to see yet another piece of community engagement which clearly indicates environmental sustainability and action to address climate change as pretty strong priorities. This piece of community engagement is but one of many pieces of recent engagement work telling a similar story. We of course heard it for the environmental sustainability strategy, which we considered not long ago, but you'd expect that. But we also heard a similar kind of story on the council plan and in the engagement for the community vision, which was pretty extensive community engagement. So it's just one more piece of the puzzle that's incrementally revealing a picture of how our community wants to respond to climate change. And that picture clearly shows a community increasingly in favour of some decisive action. Now I thought it's probably fitting and the results of this engagement kind of are in step with a recently released report of great significance. It's one I'm sure most of you will be well aware of, and that's the most recent report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which came out about 2 weeks ago. And as with every new piece of work that comes out of this body, the IPCC, the message becomes stronger and clearer. And it's at a point now where it's pretty clear that we need to get on with the job.
Point of order. A point of order. We're not talking to the motion. We're not talking to the draft.
The recommendation.
Plan. Yes.
Okay. Motion noted. Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Herry, about the motion itself?
Yeah, no, not at all. Thank you, Mayor Rees. I just wanted to point out that part, which was a prominent feature of the engagement informing this document. So I do think it's relevant.
Thank you. We'll move on. Did any other councillor want to talk? Before I hand back to Councillor Fuller as the mover of the recommendation to move forward? No, Councillor Fuller, do you have anything to sign off? Thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour of accepting the infrastructure services item 15.1. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. We'll now move to item number, sorry, that was the draft financial plan 14.1. Thank you. This is 15.1. I'll hand over to Infrastructure Services Director Marcus Goonan to talk to us about that. Thank you.
Mayor Rees, this report is presented to Council to provide details of the tender evaluation and to award the contract for the upgrading of the heating, ventilation and air conditioning systems at the Wangaratta Government Centre, the Wangaratta Performing Arts Centre, Conference Centre and the Art Gallery. The systems at the Wangaratta Government Centre is almost 40 years old and is still using a R22 refrigerant gas, which is now banned within Australia. The PAC system is over 10 years old and has a number of leaks, and the air conditioning system at the Art Gallery is almost 30 years old and in serious need of repair. The tender has been undertaken, and at this point in time, we are looking to Council to award the contract for the upgrade works to AG Coombs. We're looking also for Council to bring forward $407,389 from future year budgets, seek the $480,000 within this financial year in capital works savings, and authorise the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal the documents and disclose the contract price.
Thank you, Director Goonan. Thank you. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Herry, and a seconder. Councillor Benton. Councillor Herry, would you like to talk on the recommendation?
Well, thanks, Mayor Rees. Yeah, look, I wasn't overly thrilled with the proposition of replacing a gas system with another gas system. Ideally, we want to try and figure out a way to electrify a lot of our operations, but upon learning more about it and being briefed by Marcus's team, it became clear that the officers had, back in the beginning of scoping out this project, had included electric options like a heat pump option, similar to your reverse cycle type air conditioners you find on residential and a lot of commercial operations. They had scoped that out, but unfortunately there were quite a number of limitations as outlined and highlighted in the report here, and largely they related to the load-bearing capacity of the government centre in particular. So as it stands, replacement with another slightly more efficient gas system, which should see out another 15 years or so, which is the expected life of this sort of asset, is a reasonable outcome in this situation.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. Harry, anybody further there like to talk on the recommendation? No. Okay, I'll put the recommendation to the vote that all those in favour of proceeding. The recommendation is carried. Thank you, Director Goonan. We'll now go down to development services. We've got 16.1, which is an application to amend a 173 agreement. Thank you, Director Swartz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is about an application to amend an agreement under Section 173 of the Planning and Environment Act. The agreement applies to land in Old School Road, Wildara. The agreement effectively prohibits any development on the land, which was not the intention of the original agreement. The agreement entered into in 2013 was put in place to avoid native vegetation removal. Notices have been given to all parties bound by the agreement, as well as adjoining landowners and occupiers, and 14 objections have been received to the application. Based on an assessment against the Planning Environment Act, Council officers recommend that Council support the application to amend the agreement.
Thank you, Director Swart. Just go back to the full screen of councillors. Thanks, Beck. Great. Can I look for a mover of the recommendation, please? Thank you, Councillor Bussell. And a seconder, please. Councillor Benton, I got that one. Thank you. Councillor Bussell, did you want to talk on the recommendation?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's very clear that this is an error in the original interpretation of what it was put there for, and I think it's only fitting to tie it up now. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other council like to talk to the recommendation? No, I'll take that as the no from everybody. No hands up. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those against? Just note Councillor Fuller against on that recommendation. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Fuller. We'll now move on to the next one. Thank you, Director Swart again. This is a planning permit application, PLN APP 21/055, 297 Kneebones Gap Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is about a planning permit application.
Sorry, I'll come back to another. I forgot to disclose the contract price for the previous, but I'll come back after this, your section. Sorry, Stephen.
So this item is about a planning permit application for the use and development of land for a second dwelling and for the use of an existing dwelling as a host farm at 297 Kneebones Gap Road. This land is in the farming zone. Notice of the application was given in accordance with the Planning Environment Act and no objections were received. The application was also referred to Goulburn Murray Water, and in response they require conditions to be placed on any permit that council decide to issue. The application was also referred to the CFA, who did not object to the application but raised some questions about the gradient of the access to the proposed new dwelling. The application has been assessed against the requirements of the Wangaratta Planning Scheme and the Planning Environment Act, and officers recommend refusal of the application as the proposal is considered inconsistent with local planning policy, state planning policy, the farming zone, decision guidelines, including matters set out in Section 60 of the Planning Environment Act. More specifically, the application is mainly not supported as the new dwelling does not serve an agricultural purpose and will be unnecessarily situated in an isolated location away from existing infrastructure and other sensitive uses on the site and in a prominent visual location in a rural landscape. The application has also failed to demonstrate that the driveway extension to the new dwelling will provide all-weather access or access in accordance with relevant bushfire protection measures.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Bussell, please.
I have an alternate motion. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Please, could you read your alternate motion and any major points to that alternate motion?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. My alternate motion is to issue a planning permit with respect to planning permit application PNAP 21/055 for use and development of land for a second dwelling and use of existing dwelling as host farm at 297 Kneebones Gap Road, Bobinawarra, subject to conditions listed below. And I just want to note one, which is point 3. Prior to the commencement of the use, the owner of the subject land must, at no cost to the responsible authority, enter into an agreement in a form satisfactory to the responsible authority with the responsible authority pursuant to section 173 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 and confirmation of registration submitted. This agreement must provide that the owners of the subject land must not be subdivided so as to create additional lots, and agree that the existing dwelling on site must only be used for the purpose of host farm unless otherwise agreed in writing by the responsible authority. The owner-operator under this permit must pay full costs of the preparation, execution and registration of the section 173 agreement. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. So you're the mover of the alternate recommendation. So we're going to run with that alternate recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please, for the alternate recommendation? Councillor Fitzpatrick for this one. Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Bussell, did you want to talk further as the mover on this recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I've been on the record, public record, expressing my concerns about the lack of accommodation in the Southern Ward, but I will look at every application on its merits because farming comes first in the farming zone. And I believe in the 21st century, farming is more than cows and sheep. It also includes farming guests in accommodation. I'm a 4th generation sheep farmer, so I have a very good understanding of farming in this area for the last 100 years and clear vision where my community is going in the future. I have no problems with a second house on this farm because it's good for farming. I have no problems with the good road up the hill because if there is a lightning strike, at least the fire truck will be able to get there. So that's also good for farming. Economic development for our region, this can only be only a plus. And I see that also, I just can't find a good reason to say no. I've looked backwards and forwards over this and there just is no good reason in my mind. And it's interesting that our next item on the agenda talks about projects like this. So to conclude, I urge to approve this application because it's good for farming. And I also think it's great for Wangaratta. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. And if other councillors would like to respond, please. Councillor Grant, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'm certainly supporting this on tourism and economic development on that basis. I think it's going to be a positive for this part of Wangaratta, and speaking to the applicants and their enthusiasm for what they're going to do on that land, I think is a positive. And we need to now look laterally, and I think Councillor Bussell did talk about it's not just about cows and sheep, it's about people, and it's about looking differently at how we use the land that we have and put it to best use. So I'm certainly in support of the application. Always difficult in planning, and every planning application has to be considered on its individual merits. And we certainly have given this a lot of thought and a lot of consideration, and I think it's a worthwhile application.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Other councillors, Councillor Herry, please. And I'll get to then Councillor Fitzpatrick and Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not just about cows and sheep. I guess I see the application before us is one that's about considering a second dwelling on a piece of agricultural land zoned farming zone. And such a second dwelling needs to satisfy the requirement that the proposed addition of the second dwelling is necessary to achieve the objectives of the agricultural operation in question. And even then, it must be developed in such a way as to mitigate and try and reduce any potential negative impact upon the use of that agricultural land and also adjacent agricultural land now, and not just now, but also into the future. So I struggle because as the application stands, a second dwelling is not demonstrated as required for the agricultural operation. This is an application for a second dwelling to ultimately enable a tourism objective, not an agricultural objective. And there's nothing that's inherently a problem in there being a tourism objective as opposed to or alongside an agricultural objective. It's just that we're making a planning decision and it needs to be considered in the context of the planning policy ecosystem. I would like to say that, of course, this planning application does appeal to me on many grounds. I definitely concur with Councillor Grant's comments about it's not just about cows and sheep. There are a lot of different types of farming, different approaches to agricultural activity that can potentially unlock and provide some really good economic returns to the community above and beyond the standard livestock broadacre type approach. And the farm plan that's put forth in the application indicates a desire to pursue sustainable farming practices. I'm very much in support of that line of work. It's also including a dwelling with a design that's careful not to be at odds with the landscape. And I guess that's one aspect that I would probably disagree with some elements of the council or of the report, because I feel that it has been designed such that it mitigates that prominent building on a hilltop sort of issue. It's also designed with energy efficiency in mind, so I can definitely support that. But I guess in reviewing the planning scheme and the policy context, it sort of prompts me to pose a question, which is, could the applicant reside in the existing house? Because there is an existing house, and do all of that farming operation and also still provide a bed and breakfast or farmhouse type setup. And I believe one could argue that indeed they could. So I just reiterate the point that given we're making a planning decision, our decision really needs to pay heed to the planning scheme and the state and local policies and municipal strategic statement that's included in that. Perhaps another important point to factor into the consideration is that there were points of compromise suggested along the process. These compromises were suggested by the planning department to sort of try and find a middle ground which might produce a more acceptable planning outcome, one that's going to fit within the existing policy framework. And this included things like moving the dwelling down so that it's kind of clustered and closer to the existing dwelling, and that would alleviate some of the issues that surround having a residential dwelling in really close proximity to another agricultural farming zoned property, because the current application is about 15 metres from a fence line on an adjacent farming zoned piece of land, and the minimum is 30 metres. So
thanks, Jack. I think we'll wind you up there, mate. We've well past your time.
All right.
To give others, but thank you for your input.
Mr. Mayor, could I just finish on one different point briefly?
Quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Look, so I just want to say that we are required to do a planning scheme review. So I'm definitely keen to investigate how we could maybe create a policy context that would maybe be a bit more open to different ways of using agricultural land, especially land that's not high or very high agricultural versatility, as is the case here.
Thanks, Jack. Good ending point. Councillor Fitzpatrick, I did see your hand up there. Nothing further from you now, or?
No, nothing further from me now. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Benton.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I must admit I'm not real comfortable with the idea with the density ratio, and I bring it back to the 1 in 40 hectare density ratio in farming zone, and this municipality struggled over quite some considerable time in trying to get some sort of compatible consensus with the community in relationship to the housing density in an agricultural zone. And seeing this is going to have 2 homes on less than on 100 acres, which is virtually halving the density ratio, we're going to set a precedent that, okay, we've got to be able to look at each application when it comes forward. And as we've heard a fair bit about agriculture, and agriculture comes in and out as the flavour of the month, depending on what industry you're involved in. If you're in tourism and you're into the winery, it's the tourism side, but it's all agriculture. Yes, we do need accommodation, but don't forget, this doesn't go to the people, because the people think that they're going to build another house up on top of the rise there. This application, it goes to the land. The next lot of people, what do they want to do? And then we can come in, we come back and subdivide. We've got a 173 agreement, which I thought, I'm starting to doubt whether the use of the 173 is getting overused. We've just had a motion go through altering a 173 agreement. Over the last term, we spent a fair bit of time and anguish over trying to solve neighbourhood disputes in agricultural zones. So much so that multi-uses, and I thought a fertiliser company of an agricultural zone would be the most iconic thing to be in an agricultural zone, but VCAT threw it out. So I'm a little bit supportive of Councillor Herry's idea that if we're going to start doing these things, we're going to have to seriously have a look at the zones. Or why do we have zones? If you're going to do whatever you want to do, when somebody walks in and says, look, I want to build a house over here, or we want to put about 3 or 4 houses on there, what's going to stop you? What rules and regulations are we going to run by? If we're going to move this into the tourism side, I think we, as a council, are going to have a serious look at the zoning we've got in front of us, and we just don't play by the rules. I think the colleagues, when you move this, you've got to look a little bit further than the short term of these people having the use of a home, because there'll be another one, there'll be a flood of them come in relationship to this, and the justification of how you're going to handle it going forward. We have rules at the moment, and I think the one home density ratio in 40 hectares has been workable with the excisions to try and protect the activities of agriculture. And some of them aren't as 9 to 5 operations as some of the people out of the metropolitan area think they are. So I'm afraid I cannot give me support to the motion on those grounds. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor Fuller, I've heard from everyone else but you. Did you want to talk on this recommendation, or you happy to?
I just want to echo 2 parts to both Councillor Benton and Harry in regards to this review of what we've got and how we're using it, because it is coming up frequently enough, I think, for us to know that we need a better review of how it's unfolding, and therefore, where possible, to look at this density ratio and how we can better work it for our community to grow in a proper way.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Bustle, before I go back to you, I'd like to say a few words on this recommendation too. So I note Councillor Herries and Councillor Benton's report, and especially about the that we have this planning scheme to protect that. We also have 7 councillors who are here to change things. And that's what we're here to do. We represent the community and what they're feeling today, and this planning review is a great thing, but that might take 5 years to get that through. And a lot of disappointed people on things we believe is right now, but it doesn't say it in the planning scheme today. So let's get in front of the planning scheme. I also looked to the report that I read by the applicants, And in reply, I note that there is no reference in the officer's report to the reasons stated in the planning application by the people for a good outcome for tourism and provisions of accommodation, which is encouraged by council. Nor does it state in the planning scheme that the planning scheme does allow for uses in a farming zone for other uses to be considered. But I find the rural city of Wangaratta, through our planning department, just seems to entertain doesn't entertain things unless it's for a farming use or a relationship to farming. I also note that Stephen Swart brought up in his report specifically about the context in relation to the CFA and a fire track. Now, normally, this is just, if it was to be approved, this is just a condition on a permit, and it's up to the applicant to make the provision to make sure that the pathway works. I'm very confident the people can do that quite comfortably. Otherwise, that is just a condition on a permit. If they can't make that work, well, they can't continue with their permit if they can't. But I don't think it was a major thing to bring up as part of a reason why the application should be declined. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll hand it back to Deputy Mayor Councillor Bustle to finish off as the mover.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I urge my colleagues to support this. It's good for farming and it's good for Wangaratta. It's fantastic for Wangaratta. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation by Councillor Bustle? 1, 2, 3, 4. And all those against? Councillor Herry, Councillor Fuller and Councillor Benton. So the recommendation is carried. Thank you. We will move on now to 16.3. Thank you, Director Swart, activating the King Valley Prosecco Road Plan. I can't hear you, Stephen. Hello. Can everybody hear Director Swart here, or is it just me that's not hearing?
No, Marys, I believe.
Can you hear me now?
That's it. We can hear you now. Thank you, Director.
Sorry, Mayor, I dropped off just before that decision was made. So have you moved on to item 16.3?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just move to my notes. So this item is about the activating King Valley Prosecco Road Plan and associated business cases. These documents were prepared for Tourism Northeast and funded by the state government. The plan and business cases are attached to the agenda and were prepared in consultation with key tourism stakeholders in the King Valley. The purpose of the plan is to establish the King Valley as the most desired and recognised wine region in Australia, and the plan will help guide future decision-making and investment into the King Valley's tourism offering. The aims of the plan included to enhance the visitor experience through improved visitor infrastructure and services, increase awareness of the King Valley, showcase and celebrate Indigenous culture and Italian heritage, grow overnight visitation, and create additional visitor activities. The Victorian government has also made available $4 million to implement some of the recommendations out of the plan, and that's part of a project known as the King Valley Prosecco Road Revitalisation Project. Council is requested to note the plan and associated business cases.
Thank you, Director Swart. I'll look to councillors for a mover, please. Councillor Bustle, and a seconder, Councillor Fuller. Thank you. Councillor Bustle, did you want to talk on the recommendation?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is a really, really good report. I'm very happy to note this report. These plans, because all that I've read, I really, really like, and it measures with all the people that I have consultation with in the King Valley. there's one part that I really like is the King Valley to be the best wine region in Australia. And I think that's sensational. And given the fact that I have a connection to the Barossa Valley, I'm happy for that competition to work head to head there. And putting our small townships front and centre in this is really, really important because they have so much potential to create that great valley, to improve it. And also the prosperous years in the King Valley, you know, we've had some very prosperous years in the past, but our best years are well and truly in front of us. And this plan talks really, really well to that. So the only thing that I could add to the plan is for the federal government to build an interchange at the Hume Freeway under the King Valley Road, and for the state government to upgrade the road. That's all I'd like to add to it, Mr. Mayor. The King Valley is, you know, going to have a fantastic future. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. Any other councillor like to talk on the? Thank you, Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. I'd like to acknowledge the people in the King Valley who have made the valley what it is today, and the people that have had the vision to put the focus on Prosecco and the wine that they do so well, and the heritage that has grown in that valley over a period of time. I think it's fantastic. Also, support to the government, or thank you for the government for supporting this particular initiative. I'm looking forward to the valley being an even more beautiful and wonderful place to visit, and certainly to build on the strengths that it already has and develop greater strengths into the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Any other councillors like to talk on this further? Councillor Fuller, please.
I'd like to just acknowledge also the report and the way it's been put together, but also acknowledge Deputy Mayor Bussell and his advocacy for work to be done in this field, because it's obviously a passion of his, but it's been streaming to the rest of us in terms of his dreams and visions, and, you know, excited part of the Great Southern Ward. So thank you, Deputy Mayor Bussell.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I'd like to reiterate that what Councillor Fuller said, there's never a more passionate councillor with his ward specifically than Councillor Bussell, and his direction that he takes with all his user groups out there, etc., is just outstanding. So thank you, Councillor Bussell, for being proactive for Wangaratta and specifically your ward. If there's no further people to talk on this, I'll put the, sorry, Councillor Bussell, I'll go back to you as the mover to finish off.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And the other exciting thing about this is to wait and see what sort of artwork gets put at the roundabout of the Snow Road, the King Valley Road. That'll be sensational. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Look forward to it too. So I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Yes, the recommendation is carried. Thank you. Now, before we move on, I'm just going to go back. So in and out of my of being dropped out at the first part of the meeting, I'd just like to go back to the where we mentioned the corporate services with the draft financial plan. When I called for the vote, I kind of referred to item 15 at that time, or 15.1. Are we all clear that we all voted in affirmative to 14.1 in moving that we go ahead with the draft financial plan going out? So we were all okay. It was just me mixing it up on the line here. And so that's great. So thanks for the input there, Dave. I did want to just clear that one up. And we'll go to 15.1, where we talked about the heating and ventilation air conditioning system, and we approved to go ahead and do that. We didn't announce the contract price. So I'll now transfer back to Director Goonan to announce the contract price.
There is. The contract price is $3,148,799.
Great, thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll just move down. There's no special committee reports, advisory committee reports. There's no notices of motion and no urgent business, and there is no public question time. So the only thing we've got left to do is to sign off. So thank you again during these COVID times. We wish everybody in the community well during these next week and a half or so of lockdowns, and fingers crossed that we stay COVID free. Tell your families that you love them tonight when you're at home with them. Again, big thank you again, signing off for the last time, Director Chubb, and goodbye, and good luck with your future. And to everybody, stay safe, and we'll